Hello, and welcome to Linux Learning. In this class, we're going to start working with text fields. We're also going to start building our first custom Linux application. Starting with this video, and in the videos that follow, we're going to begin building a Customer Relationship Management, or CRM, application. We're going to build it from scratch, and you're going to build your own custom database. Don't worry if you've never built a database before. You don't need any experience, but when we're done, you're going to be able to build custom applications in the Linux database solution. Now, you can learn by watching, but you can also learn by doing. This video is designed so you can follow along on your own computer. If you want to hit pause and practice things a couple of times, that's great. And if you need to rewind and kind of refresh your memory of what you just heard, go ahead and do that too. Learn at your own pace, and let's have fun learning Linux. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, excuse me, we're going to begin by creating a new database. So I want you to start Linux, either in the cloud or the application running on your computer. And from this desktop, I want you to find the box with the plus sign above the words New Database. And let's go ahead and click on that. Now, as we've talked about in previous classes, there are lots of templates that we can use to get started and kind of understand what Linux does and how it does it. But for tonight, we're going to start with a blank sheet of paper, technological paper as it were. So let's go ahead and click on New in the top left-hand corner to start with a new and empty database. We're going to name this database My Custom CRM with the letters MY in my and CRM in all caps. You can save it locally or to the cloud, but once you've got it named, go ahead and click the blue button in the bottom right-hand corner that says Create Database. Linux will build a blank system for us and immediately take us to our desktop. Now, as you remember from some previous classes, you can use Linux with your taskbar or your sidebar open or closed in full desktop mode. It really doesn't matter. For these classes, I'm going to work with my sidebar open, but everything we do, you'll be able to do with your sidebar open or closed. Also, I want you to take a moment and find your wrench, your toolkit, in the top right-hand corner. If that wrench is not glowing red, go ahead and click on it until it is, because we want to be in administrative mode, because we're not just going to work with a database, we're going to build, construct, and architect a Linux database. And we're going to start by creating our first table. With the wrench glowing red in the top right-hand corner, find the box that says New Table in the top left-hand corner of our workspace and click on it. This will bring up the table management screen. We're going to name our first table Customer, C-U-S-T-O-M-E-R. Now, because we're working with text fields in this class, let's start there. Go ahead and grab a text field from the right-hand column, the Create Field column. Click, hold your mouse, and drag it into the Fields section in the middle of your screen. Do the same with a multi-line text field and a rich text field. At this point, you should have three fields in the center of your screen: text, text multi-line, and rich text. Now, go ahead and find the Save Changes button in the bottom right-hand corner of the window and click it to return to our desktop. Remember, save early, save often. Back up your work so in case anything happens to your computer, you don't lose work and have to start over. To return to our database, we should now see the customer table in the top left-hand corner of our workspace. Go ahead and click on it, or you can see the customer table listed now in our sidebar. You could access it that way also. The default operation process in Linux is when you select a table by clicking on it, as we just did, it will bring you to the default listing view. This is a row by row, column by column, or field by field presentation of all of the data content in the table. In this case, it's a brand new table. We haven't entered anything. We've created created 3 fields in the table, but we haven't put any content in them. Let's create our first field, or at least take a look at the form screen and see what we've done. Click on the plus sign to open up form mode. Again, your wrench in the top right-hand corner should be glowing red, and you know this is true if your tool palette is available and visible on the left-hand side of your workspace. If your wrench is not on and you're not in administrative mode, as you can see, there'll be no tool palette. Click the wrench until it glows red and your toolbox appears. Now, when you drag a field or insert a field into a Linux table, Linux will automatically name it according to what kind of field it is and how many other fields like that you already have in the table. Which brings us to one of the first rules of Linux database development. No table can have 2 fields with the exact same name. Now, we need a few more fields, so let's go ahead and click on Edit Fields in the toolbox on the left to go back into our table management window. And I want you to grab one more text field. Grab it from the Create Field column on the right, click and hold the mouse, and drag it into the Fields column in the center of our screen. With it highlighted, and by highlighted I mean you have this blue bar indicating your mouse is hovering over the field, click and hold again, and drag it up 2 spaces until it appears immediately below the first text field that we created just a few moments ago, and when it's there, let go of your mouse. It is important to remember that fields will appear in Form View in Linux in the same order they appear in the data model as it's presented here on our table management screen. And remember what I just said. No 2 fields in Linux can have the same name. Because we already had one field called text, when we inserted the second text field, Linux automatically named it text2. And it doesn't matter what kind of field it is. You can have a text field and a numeric field and a choice field. 3 very different kinds of fields. But even though they're different fields, they cannot have the same name. Speaking of names, let's give these fields more meaningful names so we better understand the kind of data that they're going to store. Hovering over the first text field at the top of the screen, when the blue bar is there, click to open up the text properties window. Now, you'll see field name, required, default name, min, and maximum length in this arrow pointing to more options. We're going to get to more options in a moment, but what we want to do right now is name this field. So let's take our cursor, click in the white area of the field name field where it says text, highlight the entire word text, and type first name with a single space between the 2 words, and click OK. Repeat this process with text field 2. Hover over it, click on it to open up the properties window, select the field name, in this case text2, and replace it with the words last space name, and again click OK. Now rename the multiline text field customer comments and accept that change. And finally, rename the rich text field customer notes with a parenthesis and then type internal use only. Now, it's important to realize that the name we give a field is the way that name will be labeled in Form View. We can change the field's label in reports and on-screen views, but when it's in Field View, its name in the data model, according to this table management screen, will be its name and label in Form View when we're viewing and interacting with our data. Go ahead and click OK. And again, save our changes. Now, we want to go back and look at this table again. Last time, to go into table management mode, we clicked on the wrench, the Edit Fields option in the toolkit. Let me show you a different way to do that. Note that there is a gear towards the very middle top of your screen. If you hover over that gear, you'll see Hover Help or a tooltip that says Actions. Go ahead and click right in the middle of the gear to open up our options window and select Edit Fields. This will again take us back to data or table management mode. Now, there's a couple other things we'd like to do with this table. First of all, I want to give it an icon, a visual graphic indicator that goes along with its name. So let's click on the blank icon field right below table name to bring up our Ninox icon selector. And right towards the middle of your screen, you're going to see this icon right here of 3 people in a crowd. It's right next to the graduate. Go ahead and click on it once to select it, and you should see it appear in the icon screen. Now, we want this table to be visible, so let's go ahead and leave hidden unchecked. And we also want it to be a target for the Ninox search engine, which we're going to talk about later, so let's go ahead and leave that one checked. We don't need any triggers at this point. We want it to be readable and writable at all times, which means we can see the contents and modify the contents of our table. And finally, it has the Ninox assigned global unique identifier. As we've talked about in previous training videos, we don't need to worry about this. We don't want to change it. The table needs it. Ninox knows what it needs to be. We're going to leave that alone for now. And we're going to go ahead and click Save Changes. But before we do, take a second to make sure that your customer table and your customer table management screen looks the way mine does on this video. The only exception will be your global unique identifier will be different, but everything else should be the same. When it's the same, click Save Changes, and you should now be looking at the form view of a blank, empty customer record in our newly created customer table. Now, as I said, our fields appear in the order in which they appeared when listed in our table management screen. This order is going to work for us for now, but the size of these fields is a little off. We don't need first and last name fields that are quite this large. So we're going to select these fields and size them appropriately. When we select a field, we first hover over that field with our mouse. Our mouse cursor will turn into a crosshair, an arrow pointing in all 4 directions, and a red box will glow around the field and the field's title, name, or label. Click once until you see the wrench appear in the center of the field and a red border outline that red box. You'll also know you've selected a field when you see a sizing handle in the middle, bottom, and far right side of the field. And speaking of that sizing box, go ahead and grab it. Hover your mouse over the box until it turns into a right pointing arrow. Click and hold and drag to the left until you can't drag anymore. I want that first name field to be as small as possible. Do the same with the last name field. Select it, grab the sizing box on the right, click, hold, and drag to the left until the last name field is as small as we can make it. Click on Save Changes in the top right-hand corner. Now, while we're looking at this blank record, let's go ahead and put some data content into the fields that we've created. Remember, the wrench or the administrative mode switch is a toggle switch. Right now it should be glowing red, and our toolbox should appear on the left of our workspace. Let's go ahead and put the wrench back and close the toolbox by clicking on it until it's gray and not glowing red. Let's take our cursor and now select the first name field. Note this time when we hover over the field, we don't see that red glowing box because we're no longer in administrative mode. Now when we click on the field, it has a blue border, which tells us we are in data entry mode. And while we're in that mode, with the cursor blinking in the first name field, let's type the first name Robert. Take your mouse, click on the last name field, and type Jones. Robert Jones, with the first character of each word capitalized and the remainder in lowercase. Now, to accept this data and open up a new blank record where we can put in our next pieces of information, find the plus sign near that wrench in the top right-hand corner. If you hover over the plus sign, you'll see the Create Record tooltip. Let's click on that plus sign. Now, we will again see a blank record, and this time let's create the record for first name Karen, last name Smith. Hit the return or enter key to accept that record, and now let's hit the close icon next to the customer name tab to close the form view and return to the table view or the record listing that is the default view for this table. We should see 4 fields: the ID field, first name, customer comments, and customer notes. You will not see all the fields we created. There's a last name field that is missing. And there's an ID field that we didn't create. Remember, Ninox uniquely identifies every record in every table, in every database, with a numeric code. The numeric codes are assigned sequentially, and if we were to delete a record, the code that had been assigned to the record that we've now gotten rid of will never be reused. Let's experiment with that. You'll see the number 2 in the far left column between the sidebar, if it's open, and just to the left of the ID number 2 for Karen. Click on that number 2 until there is a check mark where that 2 used to be. The form view will reopen. We have now selected an existing record, and I want to delete this record. There are 2 ways we can delete a record. First, let's find the garbage can or the trash can in the top right-hand area, just one icon to the left of that plus sign. Let's click it, and because this operation cannot be undone, let's confirm the deletion of the Karen Smith record. Now, let's create a new record. How did we do that? Remember that plus sign. We see one in the top right-hand section of our screen, and we see one where that 2 used to be. Click either one to open up a new blank record. Having gotten rid of the Karen Smith record, let's put in the one that we really wanted, which is Kathy Smith with a C. Capital C, A-T-H-Y, and then selecting the last name field, capital S-I-M-T-H. Let's click the X to close and accept that record. You will note that we now have 2 records, each one with its own identification number, 1 and 3. Identification number 2, or ID 2, was assigned to the previous record that we deleted. There will never be a number 2 ID record in this table again, and it doesn't matter. The ID records, the ID fields, are assigned by Ninox. We will use them, but the number Ninox assigns doesn't matter in terms of how we're going to use these fields. so don't worry if they're not sequential. Okay, now we should be looking at our Linux screen. We should be in list view mode with two records, Robert and Kathy, identified as records number 1 and 3. Now, I want to work with this view a little bit because what Linux is showing me is not exactly what I want to see. I know we're working with text fields tonight, but let's learn a couple other things as long as we're here. Let's go into administrative mode. Select the wrench in the top right-hand corner, click it until it glows red. Now, I want to click on the field that says Customer Comments. Click in the gray area that contains the column label for the third column. Click one time and release your mouse until the column options window appears. We're going to change this view a little bit. First, by hiding the Customer Comments column. Do the same with Customer Notes. Point with your cursor to the column heading, click once to select, and click the Hide Column button that appears in the bottom left-hand corner of the options window to make that column go away. As long as we're at it, let's go ahead and hide the ID column also. At this point, we should see two records in one column. I want to see one more column. I want to add another field of data to this view. To do that, click on the one field of data visible, the first name field. Click on the first name column label heading. And this time, instead of hiding a column, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to show a column by clicking on the blue button in the bottom right-hand corner. This will present us with a list of all of the fields that we created in our table that are not already being displayed. Note in this list, in addition to a formula field, which is always the first option in any view, we have the ID field, which was created and populated by Linux, the last name field, the customer comments, and the customer notes internal use only field. We have the indicators to the left of the names we assigned to those fields, telling us what kind of field it is. Notice we do not have first name as an option in the Show Column pop-up window. It is not an option because it is already visible. Click Last Name to make that the second column we're going to view. And let's make these fields a little bit bigger. With your cursor, hover over the small, thin line between the first name and the second name column until your cursor turns to a crosshair, but this time instead of arrows pointing in all four directions, there'll be a vertical line down the middle with arrows pointing left and right. We call this a sizing cursor. When the sizing cursor appears with arrows pointing left to the first name label and right to the last name label, click and hold and drag to the right until your first name column is about twice as wide as it was, and release your mouse. Do the same to resize the last name field. Hover your cursor over the right column border of the last name column until it turns to a sizing cursor. Click and hold your mouse. Drag it all the way out until it's just about the same width as the first name column. And finally, we're going to change the order. I want to see this information according to last name, with the last name column being the leftmost or the first column we see. Take your mouse and hover over the column label, the last name label, for the rightmost column on our screen. Click and hold our mouse. Your cursor will not change, it'll still be an arrow. But with you clicking and holding your mouse, drag the last name field until it replaces the first name field as the leftmost column in our view. And when it is there, release the mouse. We should now see two records, rows 1 and 2, the Smith record first, the Jones record second, followed by the first name, Kathy and Robert. To save these changes, go to the wrench, which should be glowing red in the right-hand corner, and click on it to save our changes and turn off administrative mode. Now what we have done is we've created a table, added a variety of text fields to that table. We have named those fields, we've sized the fields in form view, changed the multi-record listing view, and now let's do a few other things. Let's go into the Kathy Smith record, which is identified at row number 1 in our listing. Click on either the first or the last name in that row to bring up the form view of the Kathy Smith record. Now we know how these text fields work. Let's look at our multi-line text field. Take your cursor, click in the white box under the field label Customer Comments. We know we have selected the box when the blue border appears, and we know we are in data entry mode when that border is blue. If the border were red, we would be in administrative mode, and we would in fact be interacting with the architectural structure of the table. In this case, with our wrench turned off, not red, and with this blue border around the customer comments field, we know we are in data management mode. Let's enter the following customer comments. Customer since 2004. Hit the return key to go to the next line, and then hit it again to enter a blank line, and type the following. Referred to us by Mr. Jones at Sterling Concrete Finishes Incorporated. Hit the return key 2 more times. We now see that the height of our content is getting taller than the height of the field itself. Don't worry about this. If you can't see the first line where we type customer since 2004, don't worry about it. We'll fix that in a moment. You now should have a blank line under the referred to us by line where we're going to add a third line. Always requests overnight shipping, and hit the return or enter key to add one more blank line, and then click anywhere outside the blue border to accept all of the data in that field. Now we see one of the big differences between a text field and a multi-line text field. Multi-line text fields are exactly that. They allow us to embed a carriage return and put one line, whether it's blank or has content, on top of another. And as we can see in the first line, the content of a text field can be both alphabetic and numeric. In this case, the number is 2004 in the year 2004. But understand, numbers entered into a text field are simply treated as text characters. They are not treated as digits, and they cannot be statistically or mathematically manipulated in their current form, because in this form, they are merely text elements, no different than the letters A through Z, or a period, or a question mark, or any other special text character. Now, as I said, we've got text or content in this field that is bigger than the field itself. But the field is wider than we need it to be. Remember how we resized our fields? Let's go ahead and do that now with the customer comments field. Let's go into administrative mode by grabbing our wrench. We know we're in administrative mode because the toolbox appears. Let's hover over the customer comments field and select it. But wait a minute. We're in maintenance or administrative mode, but I selected it and I'm getting a blue box, which means I'm in data entry mode. Yes, you can manipulate data when you are in administrative mode by clicking on the data field, the white portion of the field. If you want to manipulate the underlying structure of the field, hover in the red border around the field with our wrench on, with administrative mode on. Hover in this red area until your mouse turns to a crosshair and click again. Now the entire field will glow red. The wrench will appear in the middle. And we know we're in administrative mode, not data entry. And we know we have selected this field because our sizing boxes appear in the bottom middle and far right. And it is exactly those sizing boxes that we need right now. Let's grab the bottom sizing box, hover over it with your mouse until the cursor turns to a downward pointing arrow. Click and hold on the box and drag down, adding 4 or 5 rows until we can see all 3 rows of text and all 4 blank lines that we added. Remember, there are blank lines underneath the always requests overnight shipping content. And as long as we're here, now that it's tall enough, let's get rid of some of this wasted space on the right-hand side. Let's grab our sizing box on the right, click and hold, and drag to the left until it's just big enough to hold the information with a little bit of white space to the right. And let's let go of our mouse. As long as we're at it, let's resize that customer notes field also. Select it, select the field till the wrench appears. Don't select the data entry portion. Your field should be glowing red, should be identified by a bright red border with the red wrench right in the middle. And with that wrench in the middle of the customer notes field and our sizing box is visible, let's grab the right-hand sizing box and drag it back until this field pops out of the second row and into the first row next to the customer comments field. And let go of our mouse. Now, it is important to understand that every row in the user interface layout grid, and this grid is the row column grid that allows us to place fields in specific XY locations when we are in form user interface design mode. Every row in the form will be as tall as its tallest field. And in this case, the tallest field is the customer comments field. I would like my customer notes field to be equal in height to the customer comments field. Let's resize it by grabbing the bottom sizing box, clicking and holding, and dragging down until the box is just as tall as the comments box to the left. Let's save our changes. Click anywhere outside in the gray area outside of the customer notes field to deselect it. Now we can go ahead and leave our wrench on, but let's go ahead and select the text entry area of the customer notes field and watch what happens. Remember, this is a rich text field, so we're going to see something different. Click on customer notes, and your entire screen will now be covered in the customer notes rich text editor. Rich text, like multiline text, allows us to embed carriage returns, but allows us to do so much more. For example, we can do this. We can type information about this particular customer. Favorite hobbies include, and now hit the return key. Identify and find the 3 dots, the bullets, in the formatting pod on the left of the rich text editor window and click those 3 bullets that are running top to bottom. This will insert a bulleted list, and let's enter the 3 favorite hobbies for this customer. Golf, return to go to the next line, skiing, and finally, painting. Hit the return key twice, once, and then a second time to close the bulleted list. I want to add a second demarked list, but instead of bullets, I want numbers. So we're going to type a heading of favorite products, use our return key to embed a carriage return, and this time instead of putting in a bulleted list, let's put in a numbered list. Click the 1, 2, 3 icon just to the right of the bullets, and her favorite products include, obviously, golf clubs, ski sweaters, and paintbrushes. Again, hit the return key twice to close off that list. Finally, let's have one more important piece of information in this customer notes field, and that is this, in all caps. So we're going to turn caps lock on. This customer always requests overnight shipping. And this is important, so we are going to select that entire line of text that we just typed. We're going to make it bold by clicking on the bold lowercase b in our control pod. And we're going to underline it by skipping over the italicized I. We can put this in italics characters if we want. We don't need to. But let's underline it by clicking on the underlined U. And finally, let's play around with the size of the font of this by clicking on H1, H2, H3. These different heading styles enable us to change the font size of the characters in a line so we can make them larger or smaller as our format demands. Let's go ahead and click on H1 until it is all bold, all uppercase, underlined in double size font as you see on this screen. Now, because we are in a rich text editor, we can move our text around. Let's place our cursor just to the right of the G in shipping. Click and hold, drag backwards until the entire line that begins with this customer is highlighted in blue. We call this selected text. Hover your cursor anywhere in that blue area, click the right cursor button, and select Cut. Place your cursor to the left of the F in Favorite in the line that says Favorite Hobbies Include. Hit the return key twice. Replace the cursor in the very top leftmost position of the blank line you just created, right-click, and select Paste. And the line that used to be at the very bottom is now at the very top. This is the beauty of the rich text fields in Ninox. We can not only format the text, big, bold, underlined, bullet pointed, numerically coded, but we can also manipulate the text. Now, this is not a word processor, but it is a rich text editor that allows us to format our text, to highlight and draw attention to specific portions of large bodies of text. The rich text field is great if you have legal terms or contractual terms, or maybe you're a hospital and you have to have HIPAA legislation or other health insurance information. And we all know that legal information has big fonts and small fonts and lots of indented bulleted lists, and all of that works beautifully in the Ninox rich text field. Let's accept the contents of this field by clicking OK to return us to form view. And we now see the data appearing in the customer notes field exactly as we had it in our rich text editor. Look at the screen on your computer and compare it to the screen in this video. First and last name should be on the left-hand side. Customer comments, a multi-line text field, should be in the middle of the same row, just to the right of last name. And to the right of that, the customer notes field with rich or formatted text. Let's save our changes by turning off administrative mode, and let's do a quick review. Close this record and return to the desktop by clicking on the house in full screen mode, or if your sidebar is visible, click on the little house icon to the left of My Custom CRM. And let's review. We created a new field. We named it Customer. We did that by selecting the new table box, which took us into the table management window. To return to that window, we use the gear or the actions icon that appears in the top middle of our screen, and we selected Edit Fields. Remember to add these text fields. We dragged the field type from the right to the left. Then we grabbed and held it with our mouse and moved it up and down to put it in the proper order, remembering that the order the fields appear in this middle section of our window is the same way they will appear left to right, top to bottom in Form View. We renamed each of our fields. Now, we could have done that here by hovering over the field and clicking on it to bring up the field properties. But we did it actually in Form View by simply selecting the form. Now, before we're done, let's look at one more very, very important part of Ninox, the properties of every field. We already have addressed one of those properties, and that is the name of the field. Let's look at the other property options for our three different kinds of text fields. Let's hover over the first name field and click on it to select it. We see our field name is the one that we have assigned. We see that no, this field is not required, and it can be anywhere from 0 characters to as many characters as we want. And that actually works for this field, so let's go ahead and click OK. Now select last name. Go to the required field and click on the downward pointing arrow on the right side of this combo box and select Yes. What we have now done is indicated to Ninox that there must be content in the last name field for this record to be able to be accepted into the table. And let's also indicate that no last name can be less than 2 characters by putting the number 2 in the minimum length field. The field can be as long as it needs to be, but we don't want people simply putting in a last initial. We want a full last name. And I don't believe there's any names that consist of only 1 letter. So we're going to indicate 2 as the minimum length for this field. Now there are more options, tooltips, displays, triggers, and we're going to work with those in a later video except for one, and that is the tooltip. Tooltips are sometimes referred to as hover help, and what they are is little prompts, little bubbles of text that pop up on the screen in data entry mode that help users understand what Ninox is expecting of them, what Ninox wants them to do. And in this case, what Ninox wants us to do is put in the full legal surname for each customer. And it's mandatory that we do this. So let's take our cursor and click in the white area under the field label tooltip until that field is selected with our blue outline, and type the following. Please enter full legal family surname. This information is required. And click OK. And as long as we're at it, let's add a tooltip for first name. Select the first name field, select the tooltip field, and type, please enter full legal first name. This information is optional. And click OK. Click Save Changes in the bottom right-hand corner of our window to return to our listing view. And this time let's look at Robert Jones' record by selecting it to go into Form View. We see that Robert Jones, first and last name, no comments, no notes, but hover over each of those name fields and you will see the hover help or the tooltip appear after the mouse has hovered there for at least 1.5 seconds. In this case, the hover help or the tooltip for first name is please enter full legal first name. This information is optional. And the last name, please enter the full legal family surname. Information is required. I want to add one more record before we end this lesson. Remember, click the plus sign to add the record. And note, the last name field is red. This is because we have indicated that the last name field is mandatory. A blank or null value in a mandatory field will not be accepted by Ninox. We have our hover help for first name, and let's type the first name, Stephen. But in last name, when we hover over it, before we got our tooltip, we saw the other message, please enter a value. This is a default message that Ninox will present automatically in any required field of any field type when that field is blank or null. And for the last name for Stephen, let's use Gatsby, Gatsby. We don't need any customer comments or customer notes for Mr. Gatsby, so we're going to go ahead and click the X to close the record, and note that we now have 3 records in our table. Lines 1, 2, and 3, Kathy Smith, Robert Jones, Stephen Gatsby. Remember how we moved our columns around, and remember how we sized both our columns and the fields on the screen. Now, we've done a lot of things in this lesson. We've created a brand new database and a brand new table in that database. We added 4 fields, 2 text, a multiline text, and a rich text. We sized them on the screen by selecting them in administrative mode and using the bottom and right sizing boxes to drag them to the appropriate height and width. We also used the characteristics or the options behind each field to indicate which fields were mandatory and which ones optional, and we gave our user little prompts by using the tooltip or the hover help also in our field properties. And just a quick reminder, we accessed those field properties by going into the table manager using our gear and edit fields, selecting each field individually, and clicking on it to reveal the individual characteristics or options behind this field. There are 3 different kinds of text fields in Ninox: text, multiline text, and rich. Each of them has its own set of parameters or characteristics that we can use, and we used one, the required characteristic, to indicate that the last name could not be blank. Text fields are really important. It's almost impossible to build a data table without them. And knowing which text field to use, short text fields for small blocks of text, multi-line text fields for multi-line blocks of text that have carriage returns embedded, and finally the rich text field when we not only want multiple lines of text in the same field, but we want to be able to format the visual appearance of that text, the font size, bold, underline, italics, and remember our bulleted and numeric lists. Let's click OK, and finally return to our home desktop. That's it for this lesson. Check out our next lesson where we're going to start working with numeric data, and as we continue to build our custom Ninox customer relationship management system. Thanks a lot. Hope you had fun. I'll see you in the next video.